A new job revealed. It's a Viper. But what does that even mean? As I always say, the name is meaningless. What really matters is seeing what the job actually does, and we do know a bit about what Viper seems to be doing. I have seen some concerns that the job appears to fit perfectly like a glove into the 2-minute meta as a builder-spender job, and while that is a very realistic expectation, in this video, I would like to take a bit of a look at what we know and present some other possibilities for how the job might play, based specifically on what we have seen so far, which is not a lot, admittedly. I would love to hear in the comments how you hope Viper plays, regardless of how wild the hopes might be. Now, let's start with the overview of what we have actually seen. Something that looks very much like a step 1 combo piece, something that looks like a step 2 combo piece, something that looks like a step 3 combo piece, and something that, at least to me, both could look like a step 4 combo piece, but equally could look like a resource spender of some sort, akin to Gunbreaker's Burst Strike. After this step 4, or spender, we see an action that, as part of the attack, switches the weapon to its two-handed double glaive mode, which could be comparable to summoners sacrificing a GCD to summon Bahamut, but instead of the GCD itself doing nothing, it serves as an attack itself, mildly comparable to how a Charge Blade or Switch Axe in Monster Hunter switches modes as part of their attacks. After this mode switch, we see a single attack from the glaive mode itself, which could honestly be anything. A combo step, a resource spender, maybe it sets something up for later, maybe it is even a resource generator of its own. It could be anything. And then there is a cut in the footage, after which we see the blue aura mode, while in the dual wield mode. This is then finished with a very flashy GCD, it appears. Notably, the blue aura does not end after that. With the overview in order, I would like to highlight a few things that we don't know about yet, some more obvious, some less. We don't know if the dual wield combos are all builders, whether they build anything at all, or whether the final step of it is a spender. Is the only way to enter the glaive mode through this specific attack, and if so, is it a temporary mode? It would probably look weird if you just randomly fade back into dual wield mode after a certain amount of time, so surely we can assume there's a way to naturally exit the mode again. However, we don't know how that looks though. We also don't know how the blue aura mode works precisely, or what it does, although the very unique attack suggests that it is comparable to an entirely third mode, separate from the first two. It, of course, also produces the follow-up question of, is the blue aura mode exclusive to dual wield, or can we also combine it with the glaive? How would it be different? Some things we have been told that are not shown in the footage suggests that the job will have a lot of OGCDs. With that said, the fast conclusion that some players have made is that the job is probably a builder-spender job, and it is very easy to draw this conclusion. The specific, most aggressive example I have seen is that the dual wield mode is the builder mode, the glaive mode is the spender mode, and the blue aura is simply the 2-minute burst cooldown to match with the 2-minute burst meta. Another alternative is that dual wield actions generate one resource, and the glaive actions spend this resource to generate a second resource, which then is spent to enter the blue aura mode. With the assumption that Viper gets a lot of OGCDs, this would mean that Viper is basically a more speedy take on Reaper. And the thing is, you might think the similarities are too obvious and this wouldn't happen, but we do have Dark Knight and Warrior, and Gunbreaker and Paladin, and Sage and Scholar, so it is certainly unfair to write it off as impossible. Just to add a bit more detail to this, the 1-2-3-4 combo could generate a resource, which is then spent both to enter and to perform attacks in the glaive mode. The glaive mode then, as a side effect, generates another resource that is required to enter the blue aura mode, which uses a third set of moves to attack during the mode itself. Aside from the entering glaive mode being a GCD, this is almost exactly the same loop as Reaper. However, on a more creative note, I would suggest some other ways we could interpret this toolkit. The first example assumes that the blue aura is simply a 2-minute cooldown that engages as super mode for bursting. Very, very convenient. As this would mean that you don't need to stockpile resources for a burst with the glaive, since you have a button specifically dedicated for the even minute burst. I would imagine that perhaps the job is not a builder-spender style job. The dual-wield mode has very quick attacks that thematically could prepare an opponent to get decimated by the more powerful glaive attacks. As such, the dual-wield attacks could set up buffs for yourself and/or debuffs on the enemy, and once these are set up, you can then switch to glaive mode, which is more damage focused rather than setup focused, to maximize the value of these buffs and debuffs, which could lead to a much more free-form rotation compared to other jobs, specifically allowed through the engine of having a 2-minute cooldown that can almost single-handedly deal with the whole 2-minute burst thing. This style of setup into an almost complete derailing of the rotation for the 2-minute burst is somewhat comparable to Monk's perfect balance and masterful blitz, and is also comparable to Monk's more free-form rotation compared to other jobs. Another different interpretation: the blue aura mode could actually be a double spender that requires 2 resources to access. One resource is generated by the dual wield mode, the other is generated by the glaive mode. This could also be motivated by each mode maintaining a different buff. For example, dual wield maintains a GCD reducing buff akin to Futon or Fuka, while the glaive maintains a damage increasing buff akin to Fugetsu or Disciplined Fist. This would require the rotation to involve a lot more switching between the modes, and also, of course, this assumes that what we saw of the glaive mode was simply a step 1 of a combo sequence, intentionally leaving out information to keep us guessing. I also feel that the glaive mode having more attacks and they simply weren't shown is very likely because it seems almost impossible that the blue aura mode also just has the one single attack, especially when we know that the mode doesn't end after that one attack. This interpretation would be somewhat comparable to how red mage builds up to a melee combo by generating 2 resources. Remember, nowadays the red mage melee combo is around 12.5 seconds long, so having Viper build up to a 15+ second burst certainly sounds possible. Originally, I was personally hoping for a job that is more focused on dots and the maintenance of them as a core mechanic, but I don't think that fits very well with this fast and slow style that Viper has. I also believe there is a better chance a dot-centric job would be the yet-to-be-announced mage job. Green mage, anyone? But even so, being realistic with my expectations, it would actually surprise me if either of the new DPS jobs even has a single dot to apply. Regardless, we are still lacking a lot of information on both of the jobs, so it is perfectly possible that the entire part of Viper's toolkit we haven't seen turns out to suggest that it would work in a completely different way none of us could have imagined. But despite that, how about you? How are you hoping the new Viper job plays? At the end of the day, I think we all just want a job that is fun to play, but it is always fun to speculate, so do feel free to share your ideas in the comments. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, you can let the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. And if you want to give even more support than that, you can also become a member of the channel like these wonderful people here. Fun fact, before Viper's announcement, one of the most common guesses for the job was Corsair, or something along those lines. For comparison, when all we knew about Reaper was that we were getting a more magical melee DPS in Endwalker, and that it would share gear with Dragoon, and we suspected the very pixelated picture of Xenos was carrying a scythe. One of the suggestions was Templar, a heavy armor wearing magical close combatant, although that one used holy magic. It did, however, not use a scythe. The only job that has been consistently known to wield scythes in Final Fantasy are Dark Knights.